I've got one question for the ranking member. Ranking Member Waters, in a 2008 hearing, you said, quote, "And guess what this liberal will be all about? This liberal will be all about socializing, would be about basically taking over the government and the government running all of your companies," end quote. Simple question, do you stand by that statement?
Simple answer. I am here today in this Rules Committee because we're taking up time with basically a non-issue.
What's up? Welcome back to the channel. Buckle up, because this one's straight fire. There's an old saying in politics: never ask a question if you don't already know the answer. And today, Chip Roy proved exactly why that rule exists. Because in this hearing, he didn't argue. He didn't interrupt. He didn't even raise his voice. He did something far more devastating. He quoted Maxine Waters' own words back to her on the record and hit her with one simple, killer question: do you still stand by it? What followed wasn't a debate. It was a dodge, a pivot, and one of the most unbelievable mass slips you'll ever see from a career politician. Stick with me, this moment tells you everything about how Washington really works.
Now, we can go around and around in circles about trying to talk about and defining socialism, but at its core, I was intrigued by an op-ed that I saw not too long ago by a Democrat from Cuba commenting on one of our colleagues, an avowed socialist, and essentially pointing out the extent to which democratic socialism is a lot like the system my family fled, except its proponents promised to be nicer when seizing your business. And that's the truth. That's the truth here. And so we can talk about these terms as if they don't matter, but they do. They do matter. They're actually at the core of who we are. I've got one question for the ranking member. Ranking Member Waters, in a 2008 hearing, you said, quote, "And guess what this liberal will be all about? This liberal will be all about socializing, would be about basically taking over the government and the government running all of your companies," end quote. Simple question, do you stand by that statement?
Simple answer. I am here today in this Rules Committee because we're taking up time with basically a non-issue. First of all, you claim that socialism has engulfed this country, that it keeps creeping, it's going to take over private businesses, et cetera, et cetera. That is not happening. We're in a democracy that we're trying very much to save and to not have disrupted, undermined in the way that...
So then, reclaiming my time, the gentlelady denounces your previous statement then and do not accept that previous statement that you think you would take over these private businesses? I'm not a socialist.
I'm a capitalist, and I commit to you that I am here to save Social Security, to save Medicare, to save seniors and veterans, and for some of you who have adopted certain kind of ways that you support what you now claim is socialism, I'm here to say to you, come on.
So this liberal will be all about socializing, will be all about basically taking over and the government running all of your companies. You disagree with that? You now denounce that statement?
I am not a socialist.
Okay.
All right?
So I appreciate the response. I think that to the extent that one has a concern as a member of this body or as an American watching this, one has concerns when we hear statements like this, and that's not the only one. And statements by some of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle extolling the virtues of socialism, as I just pointed out, a nicer way of confiscating businesses, a nicer way of confiscating the assets and the means of production. When now, as I think the gentleman from Kentucky was alluding to, in 1929, federal spending was 3% of GDP. At the height of COVID, 31% of GDP. In FY22, we collected a record $4.9 trillion in revenue, but still had a $1.4 trillion deficit. I think one question I would ask the chairman of financial services is, do you have full control over the means of production if you're a company? in this country, but yet the government is regulating you so much that you cannot actually carry out the use of the capital for the purpose for which you have the company created. In other words, for example, ESG requirements. For example, maybe it's some of the USDA regulations requirements that prohibit small businesses from being able to crack into the monopolies that the gentlelady from New Mexico is referring to with respect to meat processing in this country. There are heavy USD regulations prohibiting that, as the gentleman from Kentucky has talked to. I'm happy to yield to him in a minute if he would like. We could go and sit here for the next 5 days without adjourning. No, don't worry, Mr. Chairman, I won't do that. And go through a list of regulations that are impacting businesses in this country. So my question for the chairman is, do you have the full control over the means of production as a private citizen, business owner in our capitalistic system, if the government regulation is preventing you from being able to deploy that capital in the best means possible to carry out your business?
No. And this is what we're trying to address.
Did you catch that silence? That right there is what happens when a career politician gets cornered by their own damn words. This hearing was supposed to be routine. Instead, Chip Roy turned it into pure exposure, no theatrics needed. He simply went straight to the record. Roy reads a quote from a 2008 hearing, Maxine Waters' words, verbatim. This liberal will be all about socializing, basically taking over and the government running all of your companies. No spin, no interpretation. Just the quote. Then Roy asks the one question she couldn't dodge. Do you stand by that statement? And immediately the evasion kicks in. Waters doesn't answer. She calls it a non-issue. She insists socialism isn't happening. She pivots to democracy being under threat. Everything except the actual question. So Roy presses again. Do you denounce that statement? And finally she says it. I am not a socialist. I'm a capitalist. That moment is staggering. Maxine Waters, whose entire career has been built on expanding government power, defending massive federal spending, and pushing regulation deeper into every corner of the economy, suddenly wants you to believe she's a free market capitalist. Give me a break? Roy doesn't argue with her. He explains the brutal reality. Ownership on paper doesn't mean squat if you don't control your business. If the government tells you how to operate, how to allocate capital, who you can hire, what standards you must meet, and then drains your profits through taxes, inflation, and compliance, you don't own the means of production. The government does. That's the point Waters never once addressed. Roy lays it out crystal clear. This isn't socialism by force. It's socialism by regulation, achieved not through legislation but through the administrative state. ESG mandates, banking pressure, USDA rules that crush small businesses, federal agencies rewriting the economy without a single vote. And here's the part they never admit. The system doesn't punish big corporations. It protects them. Big Pharma gets liability shields. Major corporations absorb regulatory costs. Small businesses collapse. Families get crushed by inflation. And politicians claim they're saving democracy while living standards fall. Waters tries to frame regulation as protection. But Roy exposes the false choice. We're told either corporations run wild or government must control everything. What we actually have is government colluding with corporations, corporate cronyism, where power and profit flow upward and everyday Americans pay the price. Then Roy delivers the fiscal gut punch. Federal spending was just 3% of GDP in 1929. During COVID, it exploded past 30%. We collected record revenue and still ran trillion-dollar deficits. Inflation didn't come from nowhere. 1 in 4 parents now struggles to afford food or housing. That's not capitalism failing. That's government interference distorting the economy. This exchange wasn't about labels. It was about truth. Maxine Waters can call herself a capitalist all she wants. Her own words and her record say otherwise. And thanks to Chip Roy, we just watched the mass slip live. Let me know what you think in the comments right now. Was Roy exactly on target, or did he go too far? Drop it below. Was this the savage takedown of the year? Smash that like button if you're done with the hypocrisy. Hit subscribe, ring the bell. We're exposing the double standards every single day. America first. Always. Catch you in the next one.